and welcome to Views on News. I'm your host Rafae, Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be talking about the US elections, the 5th of November when the Americans go to polls. Of course, we know it's a tight race between the Republican candidate Donald Trump and the Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris. We know what the poll surveys are showing. It's a neck-on-neck contest, and of course with regards to the poll surveys, they're also subject to a margin of error. The swing states and the undecided voters, as we talk about the US elections, they're the key factors and have a lot of significance at this moment with regards to the campaigns of both the candidates as they're trying to view these voters, and their campaigns, their electoral campaigns are focused on the key swing states, with both the candidates trying to go there and presenting and talking about the concerns of those communities. We saw Kamala Harris, she talked about jobs and inflation. On the other hand, we saw Donald Trump talking about immigration and women's rights today. Of course, domestic factors are also going to have a key role in these elections, such as economy, healthcare, education, immigration, and women's rights. We know they're being a cornerstone of the electoral campaigns of both the candidates, as well as these are the issues that the American society is very concerned about at the moment. And we're also seeing polarization in the American society with regards to the poll surveys and of course the election campaigns. We know America had also saw its own version of the Arab Spring with regards to the university protests that happened, of course with regards to the Gaza conflict, and that too is going to be having an impact on the elections as well. We know foreign policy isn't much of a highlight of the American elections when it comes to what the domestic voters think about and consider before they vote. But we know foreign policy, as witnessed in the UK elections, it is having weight with regards to the Gaza conflict and of course what the candidates are saying, because in America there's a lot of Muslim population that is going to be voting as well. And there's also a lot of fresh first-time voters that will be casting their ballots. And we know the Generation Z, it is going to be, of course, having a lot of contribution in these elections as well. And we know internet and social media with regards to that is also having a weight in these elections. We'll be discussing and deliberating on the different aspects related to the US elections. In the studios, we've been joined by Almas Haider Naqvi, who is a foreign affairs expert. Along with that, we've been joined by Jauhar Saleem, who is a former foreign secretary. And we'll be joined by Jawad Tehami, who is our anchor in the United States of America, who is covering the US elections as well. We'll move towards him at the end of the show. But to start off our conversation, I'll come towards Almas Haider Naqvi. So it's a neck-on-neck race as what we're seeing from the poll surveys, and of course a very charged political atmosphere as we're seeing in the United States. Both the candidates, they take a jibe at each other almost every day. How do you comment on the electoral campaigns as they've shaped up so far with regards to the domestic factors that both the candidates are emphasizing on?
Yes, Rafae, I think these elections are so crucial for some domestic context and as well as in international context. So as you mentioned, that the US society is so polarized at this moment, and they are suffering from some economic issues and some social issues. And you know, it's in the first elections after the COVID. So the people, you know, US people are suffering from the acute inflation. So lots of domestic issues are at the hand, and both of the candidates are trying to address those of the issues, especially the healthcare issues, inflation, economy, and some education, for example, law and order situation. And then both of the candidates are trying to address their audiences and catch the sympathies of their the communities. But you know, U.S. elections are so crucial in a sense that in some states are so predictable that you can say that these are the Republicans' state and this is the Democrat state. But the decisive factor in my understandings are the swing states. So both the candidates are trying to convince their voters and they are making a hard campaign over there. So in my understanding, the 7 states or swing states are important. The first one is Nevada, the second one in Pennsylvania, the third one is Wisconsin, and the fourth one is Michigan, and then North Carolina, and Georgia, and Arizona. Even in these states, the competition is even neck to neck. You cannot predict at this moment that who is the winner.
But the swing states are going to have the vote, the impact as what you're saying. Mr. Jauhar Saleem, I'd like your comments as well. We'll move towards swing states as well. But before that, when we talk about the poll surveys and the momentums of the campaigns both the candidates are having, how reliable do you think these surveys are going to prove? And with regards to this age of internet and digital inclusivity in everything we see, whether it be different domains, we see AI also playing an important role in the modern world. Do you think social media and the internet, when we talk about the elections, it could be weaponized, of course, when we talk about data and algorithms, especially with regards to poll surveys?
Yeah, firstly, in the US, the polls used to be fairly reliable until they were not. And that was 2016, when Trump sprung a big surprise and against all the surveys and polls, he won a very close election. But we have to remember that he did trail behind Hillary Clinton in terms of popular vote by about 3 million votes. Hillary got 3 million more votes than him. But because the US elections, it's a very curious election because technically it's not a direct election. There's an electoral college and they have a very interesting system which probably is not practiced anywhere else in the world. And that is that in a state, even if a party, let's say, wins by 10 votes, but the party will carry all the electors from that state. And in total there are 538 electors and you have to get 270. So let's say Pennsylvania, which could be the decisive state in this election. It has 19 electors. So anybody voting even 500 more votes than the other candidate will get all the electors. So because of that, what has been happening in the last 2-3 elections is, it happened when Bush won against Al Gore, it happened then. He trailed in the popular vote but won the elections. It happened in the Hillary Clinton versus Trump elections. In the Biden elections as well, Biden polled 7 million votes more than Trump. But despite that, the whole election was decided by just 50,000 votes in the swing states. Now this time around, you're right, social media has become a very powerful medium now. And the young people, like everywhere in the world, and particularly in the US, they're influenced by that. But what is happening in America in terms of social media's impact is, again, very, very unusual, because what we see in this election is that the young people who were basically used to be Democrats before, they're more for Trump now, and that's across different races. So I think that is there. But at the end of the day, if you look at the surveys now, most surveys were showing that the Kamala Harris was winning. Some surveys or poll averages have now changed. For instance, RCP has changed now for Trump. But I think, and in fact, that is what I had said in my even like week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that this is an election which is for Trump's election to lose, meaning thereby that he's winning this election. And it would be a surprise, it would be an upset actually, if Kamala Harris wins from here.
Right, definitely. Almas, as the conversation has shaped up so far, how do you think, as I also mentioned in my intro, there's going to be a lot of fresh first-time voters, and of course they belong to the Generation Z. How do you think social media and the internet is going to be impacting their views with regards to, of course, gathering them and of course getting the momentum made to, of course, get those undecided voters, to get those fresh voters, and of course affect the turnout in these elections as well?
Definitely, I think the Generation Z is more linked with the social media and the internet and the cyberspace, and in the in the process of electioneering, and in my understanding, the role of the social media is so crucial, especially in the age of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So that really shaped the minds of the
I'm asking that because, of course, Kamala Harris, as we've been covering the US election since a few days now, and a few of our analysts that were in the show, they also mentioned that Kamala Harris has been campaigning, and she's also been having a lot of advertisements done for her campaigns, but she's mostly focused on the orthodox and conventional media. And whereas when we talk about Donald Trump, we know Elon Musk, the owner of the platform X, formerly Twitter, he's supportive of Trump's campaign, and there are other social media influencers and celebrities that are also in favor of Trump. How do you think this means of media and the decision to choose what kind of media is going to affect these elections? Because, of course, those relying on conventional media and those that use, of course, social media and the internet, they have a generation gap.
Yes, I think definitely the mainstream media and conventional media has a significant role in shaping minds, but we cannot ignore, especially in the age of technology, AI and the cyberspace. Now the Generation Z is more inclined towards the social media, and you know now the Generation Z is not so much convinced with the traditional media. They don't like debates. They mostly run on the televisions. They are, you know, they like the TikToks, the reels. They make their minds through such kind of the mediums. In my understanding, the Generation Z is influenced by the social media, and you know, the other generations, for example, the mid-career, mid-generation, or the older generations are so much inclined or influenced by the traditional media.
Well, of course, that signifies how the different modes of media can be used to target different audiences with regards to their age gaps. Mr. Jauhar Saleem, when we talk about the American elections, of course, there's a lot of polarization in American society as we talk about it. But when we talk about the elections, we know domestic factors play a big role in shaping the minds of the American society. Immigration, healthcare, education, of course, women's rights. We know the abortion laws and reforms regarding that, and both the stance both the candidates are having regarding that is also affecting the female voters' minds in America. How do you think these domestic factors and how the politics and campaigns both are playing at the moment are being used to swing the minds and woo the minds of the American voters, and how both the candidates could actually deliver on those promises as well?
Okay, out of these issues, I think right now, these issues are definitely there. But the two important ones which are going to decide these elections would be immigration and economy. Usually what you see is, if economy is doing well, the sitting president or the party in power never loses. That has been a tradition. But this time might be a surprise. And why do I say that? Because the economy is doing great right now in America. Unemployment is at historic lows. Inflation was up after COVID, but now it's actually gone down again. Interest rates are going down as well. So actually there's no problem with the economy. The only thing is Trump's campaign is using the fact that there was inflation. So they're saying, look, they brought inflation. All the inflation is going down now. So they are actually harping upon the theme of immigration, which for them is you know, they are touting it as the most important issue for America, and they are touting it as an invasion of foreigners, and foreigners who are uneducated, who are uncouth, who are criminals. You know, this is the narrative that they have built. Remember when Trump said, "Oh, they're eating cats and dogs and your pets," and you know, so this type of a narrative is being built. And recently, a comedian on his platform said that, you know, Puerto Rico is like a floating island or trash or whatever. So, and it is an issue for a lot of Americans, particularly in many of the swing states. And that is why I think that is really something which has invigorated the Trump camp. Economy is the second most important issue right now for most Americans, I would say. But there, Kamala Harris somehow has not been able to coherently sort of articulate a clear policy. And I think that has been a weakness that we've seen. Initially, she was trying to stay away from interviews, one-on-one interviews, although she did well in the debate where Trump sort of, he kind of blended a bit. But then he recovered subsequently. And then there was a Fox interview where Kamala Harris came as a very weak and incoherent sort of, candidate. And then again, what her predicament is that she because was the vice president, she is the sitting vice president. So she cannot really disassociate herself from Biden's policies. And so the incumbency factor is working against her because she can't say, no, I'm not the president, so all the problems that they're associating with Biden, for instance, immigration, because they are saying you allowed 10 million those illegal immigrants into the US who have really crowded all the big cities and have created so many problems for Americans, and the crime has increased and the burden on social security system, on the healthcare, on your school system, everything has increased. For that, she has not been able to articulate a very clear answer. Similarly, for economy as well, I think she could have done better. The women are voting for her because there's a glass ceiling which was and which still is there because there have never been a woman president in the US, and that is why we see majority of women are voting for sort of at least as per the polls they're voting for her. But the problem is what I think the elections would be decided if there's one group amongst sort of who this election would be decided. These are the Latins or the Hispanics, and there Trump is doing much better than what traditionally Republicans used to. Like there was used to be like 25-30% deficit that the Republicans used to have there. There was reduced to 13%, and now even sort of probably to like 7% or something. So that is one constituency where the elections might be decided, and they are everywhere. They are in these swing states as well, and that is why. But I think it's very close. They're saying historically it's the closest election ever, and as per because all the differences that you see in the polls, they are within what they call the margin of error. But despite that, the way I see the election and the way a lot of pundits are seeing the election in the US, I think Trump is on a better footing than Kamala as we speak, and it would be a surprise if Kamala is able to win from here.
Right, definitely that's some very important points that you talked about, Mr. Jauhar. Coming towards Mr. Almas, of course, we talked about the domestic factors, but we also know foreign policy, as we talk about it, it did play an effect in the UK elections. It did have a weight on the Muslim voters and how they decided who they were going to vote for. What role do you think that is going to be having in America, considering there's, of course, America also saw its own version of the Arab Spring with regards to the university protests that happened just recently, not too long ago?
Yes, of course, especially as far as the Gaza crisis is concerned. The Biden administration is extremely criticized by the human rights activists, especially, as you mentioned, the students' movements really give a hard time to the Biden administration, and certainly that will make mine to the voters and the people who are the champion of the human rights and wants a peace in the Middle East. So definitely they will vote to the Trump against Kamala Harris because she is the representative of the Democrats at this moment. So definitely, in my understanding, have an important role, some international issues, some foreign policy issues, especially the Ukraine war. Trump's policy is very much clear. He's an isolationist. He announced that he will end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. So he's so critical that he don't want to continue this war. However, if we look at the Kamala Harris position, she will support as long as she can. This is the clear position by the Kamala Harris. So then the position on China, Kamala Harris is a little bit a mixed position. She don't want to get into the more competition, and she has a different strategy than the Trump one. So the China is another factor, and the third one is Gaza, as you mentioned. So.
Mr. Jauhar Saleem, I'd like your comments as well. Of course, the Muslim voters and the American elections. How do you think the complexity at the moment, because we know Israel being a strategic ally of the United States, and of course, both the candidates, they will need to woo the Muslim voters as well. How do you think that's going to go in hand with these elections?
Well, first of all, there's a bipartisan support in the U.S. for Israel. Israel's security is a cornerstone of the U.S. foreign policy. There's no doubt about that. They state it publicly and they act on that. So the two parties do not really have a huge deal of difference when it comes to Israel. Saying that, having stated that, the Democrats have a more nuanced policy. Trump is actually, he's actually far more, in terms of rhetoric at least, for Israel than the Democrats, because the Democrats at least have a semblance of some sort of a balance in terms of their how they articulate their policy. So if for the Muslim voters there, or for the Arab voters, for example, people are saying, and they're making a big deal out of it, that there's in Michigan, which is one of the swing states, there are 200,000 Arab American votes there, and they are not happy with the Democrats. But what are they going to do? Are they going to vote for Trump? Because Trump was the architect of Abraham Accords. And Abraham Accords is actually what led to the situation in Gaza, because that is probably, a lot of analysts say that is what led to Hamas's making such desperate moves, which then led to this conflict in the first place. So I think in this situation, it's for the Arab Americans voters there, for the Muslim voters there, the choice is it's a Hobson's choice. What do they choose? They choose Democrat. I think the worst they could do is probably to stay out, and a lot of people are probably planning to do that. Then they wouldn't vote,
Right.
But if they don't vote, that is going to help Trump, because generally the Muslims there, the Arab Americans there, generally they had a proclivity to vote Democrat.
Yes.
So if they don't vote, the Democratic Party, that loses those votes at least. So I think. But in terms of policies, if Trump comes to power, then we will probably see some sort of a resumption of the whole Abraham Accord process. And he's already made some statements about that. In terms of Democrats' policy, Biden was endeavoring, first of all, for ceasefire. He genuinely tried for that because it suited them. For the elections, it was very important, And because those Arab American votes, those Muslim votes were important for the Democrats, because either they're going to vote Democrat or they're going to stay out of the election. He failed. It didn't work out. So then he tried for another thing. He tried for something he called the grand reconciliation. He tried to involve the Saudis and come up with some sort of a path to statehood for Palestine and but that didn't work out either. That if that had worked a bit, I think then probably these people would have been placated, all these voters. But unfortunately it didn't. So right now, I think that vote is probably most likely going to stay out of this election, unfortunately. Right. And that would be a protest, they'd be showing their unhappiness by not voting, and that is going to hurt the Democrats.
Well, that's the beauty of democracy. Of course, everybody gets a chance to voice their concerns and show what they're protesting for or what is affecting them. With regards to that, Mr. Jauhar Saleem, a former Foreign Secretary, and Almas Haider Naqvi, Foreign Affairs expert, thank you both for your time and your articulate views. Of course, now we'll be moving towards our anchor in the United States, Jawad Tehami, who's giving us the updates regarding the political temperatures there, as he's in New York to cover the U.S. elections. Let's see what he has for us.
So, okay, I'm standing right now here in the heart of Manhattan. This is the Fifth Avenue, and I'm really honored and privileged to be joined by our wonderful guest, political analyst, senior political analyst, Mr. Professor Mark Meirowitz. He is associated with the State University of New York, Maritime College. It's wonderful to have you, Professor Meirowitz. Thank you very much for taking time out exclusively for PTV World.
It's a pleasure indeed to do this with you here in Manhattan as compared to doing it on Skype or Zoom.
Yeah,
And meeting you in person is a privilege.
Thank you very much for having me over here and taking time out exclusively for our show. I really feel honored that this is going to be our first one-on-one interaction. Earlier we had a number of interactions, but of course online. So straight away, let me come to the point, the purpose for which I am here to cover this particular presidential elections. It is being contested neck and neck between the two candidates. So let's try to simplify the things for our viewers there in Pakistan. How this presidential election happens to be different from other elections, for example, the elections which happen in Pakistan and the UK.
Well, I mean, you see in the UK that the government can shift overnight, and the group that's the majority sits on the other side of the parliament, and the other group is in the minority. And then so British politics is something to be amazed at, but what's great about it is the force of democracy, and that people speak freely, and it's a different type of a situation with the parliament that we have in the United States and Pakistan as well. These countries have very vibrant governments and vibrant politics, and what we have in the United States today is just something very a little bit unusual, in the sense that the candidate for president is not the candidate who originally was going to be the candidate and just became the candidate literally a few months ago, and is running against President Trump, who was the president in 2016, was elected and then was not elected in 2020. So there's a whole lot of baggage here politically that people have to figure out what it's about, and figure out what do these people want to do if they get the job. And that is the key problem that Americans are having, is to unravel what do these candidates want to do, how are they going to perform in the next administration if they're elected.
Okay, so when we talk about this particular way of the electoral process itself, how the President of the United States of America, as far as the procedure of it is concerned, is elected?
Well, our election is not based on the popular vote, so we don't count each vote and add them up, and whoever has the most votes win. Our system is an electoral college, which is a very old system that we've had since the beginning of the Republic, and essentially gives weight to the states with more population. Taking California, which is our biggest population, let's say out of 538 electoral votes, has 55 electoral votes. That's very significant. And some of the smaller states, like Wyoming, only have 3. You need 270 to win. So if you follow the news, and the viewers in Pakistan, I'm sure, are following this with quite amazement, as all Americans are, everybody's trying to figure out who's going to be able to get enough electoral votes to add up to 270. So they talk a lot about the swing states, which are states with heavy amounts of Pennsylvania, 19. Other states like, I think, Georgia, North Carolina have 16. You have a bunch of those, you can actually win the election. So there is the focus in the election now are those states which are up in for grabs, unclear in terms of the results. But at the end of the day, whoever gets 270 is the winner.
So why do we call these states as swing states or battleground states? We know for a fact there are many states which are clearly deep blue or blue, which represents the Democrat side, the other, the red and the light red, which actually represent the Republican side, but they are denoted by the grayish or charcoal color, undecided votes over there. Why these swing states or the battleground states are called so? And how significant do you think this time around they are going to be critical for either of the candidates?
Well, there are two factors here. First, the battleground states, and secondly, undecided voters. I'll start with that first. we do have voters apparently still who haven't decided. It's hard to believe that anybody wouldn't decide Harris or Trump by this point, with all the discussion and all the commentary and the personal attacks. But there are, and they are very important. And it relates to the battleground states. Why? As you said, you've got deep red, deep blue, and then you've got states that Trump won by only a few votes last time, or Biden won by only a few votes last time. And we just don't know statistically, we have no idea how it's going to go. So the candidates in those states which have significant number of electoral votes which are unclear, they're going there because they want to get those in their balance sheet. So I think it's a big, big problem. Pennsylvania, of course, is the big, big ticket, and they're going there all the time, and they're not going to the smaller states. They're certainly not going to California, which is certainly going to be a blue state. And by the way, New York is a Democratic state. It's very hard to believe a Republican could win.
Yeah, we saw last time around, although it happens to be the hometown state of former President Donald Trump, and just a couple of days before, he had a huge gathering over there at Madison Square Garden. So a number of comments over there were also made by one of the comedians also that garnered a lot of criticism, generated a lot of controversy from various quarters. How do you think that is going to have an impact on any, if any, chances, if there were, for the Republicans to grab from the New York state?
Look, the comments that were made by Tony Hinchcliffe, the comedian, were not funny. They were very rude and very disgusting, and nobody questions it. In fact, the Trump campaign has condemned those remarks. Trump didn't say those remarks himself. And I wanted to make a point about the Hispanic vote in the United States. The Hispanic vote in the United States is very diverse. We have many, many people from many different Latin American countries. We have Cuban Americans who are very heavily populated in Florida, and they're Trump supporters. And I just want to mention, as a matter of information for our viewers, that the residents of Puerto Rico do not vote in the presidential election. I know people don't always know this, because they don't have any electoral votes. And why they don't is because they are not a state in the United States. Now, there are many Puerto Rican Americans who are living in New York and other states, and clearly they are voting, and they're an important bloc. Now, as far as that comment, Biden made a comment from the White House, and he said that the only garbage, because that was the comment, the awful point about Puerto Rico, about garbage. So Biden said, the only garbage I see are the supporters of Trump. Now, why would he make a comment like that? And in Politico today, they suggest that Biden made that comment maybe to hurt Harris. So this is a crazy campaign. Biden was the candidate, and he was forced out. Why would he make such a comment? And then they said he didn't really mean all the supporters, he only meant that comedian. And this is reminiscent of the election of Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump, because she said the supporters of Trump are deplorables. And that hurt her very badly. When you start calling your opponent's supporters deplorables, and Waltz and Harris are calling Trump a fascist, that becomes a problem.
But Professor Mirovich, so don't you think such type of comments or the words, strong words, have been used by the former President Donald Trump as well?
I don't know. He uses a lot of terms.
Just a couple of days before, he said that Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, was nasty, and he has also said that I am not a Nazi. It's very bad to be a Nazi. Rather, it's Kamala Harris who is a fascist.
Okay, so let's say this about that. I think that I would say that anybody using those terms is completely unacceptable, and they shouldn't do it. But I think that when you say, for example, which Waltz said when Trump did his rally in Madison Square Garden, he said, because historically in the 1930s, the Nazis had a rally in Madison Square Garden, not at the location where it is today, but at another location. That's true, but just because it was Madison Square Garden, Waltz was implying that it was a Nazi rally. I absolutely assure you, I watched it and listened to it on C-SPAN. They're absolutely not a Nazi rally. It was a Republican Party rally. So when they start throwing these attacks, these personal ad hominem attacks against their opponent, they just lose everybody's interest. And then the question everybody's asking is like, what is the job you're going to do? Harris said when she was on the ellipse, just I think 3 days ago, she said, when I go to the White House, I'm going to have a to-do list. I'm going to have it. What is on that list? What is on her list to do? As far as economy is concerned, I think both candidates have not put forward a very clear plan about what they'll do. They have tax cuts, they have tariffs. Many of those the economists have looked at, and they say, if you put those in place, you will crash the American economy. So I think we all kind of are desperate to figure out what is the policy, but in the meantime, all they're doing is insulting each other. So if you ask me what kind of election is this, I think it's a little bit unusual in terms of the personal invective. That doesn't mean that this didn't exist in the history of the United States. We've had very, very strong elections, even at the beginning of the Republic. But this one is very disappointing for the American people. We want to know what they think.
Right.
We
Okay,
don't
so-
want them to insult each other.
Okay, so there are polls suggesting so far, according to 538's daily poll tracker, Kamala Harris is 1.4 percentage points overall ahead of former President Donald Trump. How do you look at that? And why is that so? These early polls are showing that lead of Kamala Harris against Trump.
First of all the polls have margin of error, which means that when you see numbers like 50-50, it doesn't mean 50-50 because it's plus or minus 3 or 4. So that could be 47 and 53. We don't know. So I discount that. I don't think you can believe in those polls. All the pollsters have different. The one I think is a good one is the guys or the gamblers in Las Vegas. They seem to have an idea.
Okay.
I'd rather listen to them.
Okay.
But statistically, what you have is not a convincing argument that one or the other. And by the way, I assure you, for your viewers following this, that between now and Election Day, those numbers are going to shift up and down.
Up and down,
And the
okay.
problem with that is that Americans are sitting at home and they're thinking, should I vote? Shouldn't I vote? Oh, he's going to win, she's going to win. And that is not a fair thing. And so you got to take it, what we say, with a grain of salt.
So, okay, you already talked about the swing states, the top of which is Pennsylvania with the
Yes.
most electoral votes.
Yes.
Swing states happen to collectively have 93 electoral college votes. So,
okay.
Pennsylvania has got 19. So, I've been reading many analysts. Many of the analysts are of the view that whoever takes Pennsylvania, this particular election is going to go on their side. And when specifically talking about Pennsylvania, the chances, if President Trump takes it, his chances of becoming president increase to 98%. On the other hand, if Kamala Harris takes Pennsylvania, her chances of becoming the president increase to 91%. How do you look at that?
Well, I don't have the algorithms and the statistical, maps to understand that, but it's very true that there can be markers for success. Why do you think the candidates are rushing to Pennsylvania back and forth? Because I think they buy into that, and their advisors are telling them, you've got to get that one. But the question is, do they get that one and that clinches and wins the day, or you've got to get that one and Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona? The combination is what wins the day, not just the one state. But Pennsylvania obviously is a crucial state for this election. And again, the whole campaign there is Trump says Harris is a fascist, and Trump says I'm going to frack and I'm going to drill, and everybody gets confused as to what are they actually going to do. So I think that that one is, I wouldn't place a bet on that one in Las Vegas.
So what specifically about another swing state, Michigan? We saw a couple of days before Kamala Harris was there. She urged the youth over there. We saw last time back in 2020 that it saw the biggest turnout for the youth voters over there. So she has urged the young generation over there to go against fear and divisiveness. How crucial that particular state is going to be?
Michigan is very crucial, and obviously it has a large Muslim community. But again, a lot of that community has said they're not going to go vote. because they're frustrated with the Biden-Harris policies. So I think that one, again, is absolutely impossible to predict. It's a very important state. We didn't mention it before. But again, it seems to me that if you want a Harris to be president, you shouldn't say, I'm mad at you and I'm not going to vote for you. You should go out and vote. So maybe on election day, that community is going to go out and vote and swing it to Harris. There's no way to know. And, maybe they were trying to get some short-term gains in policy right now, in Middle East policy, but in the long run, I'm pretty sure they're going to go vote. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so one last quick question.
Sure.
As on the foreign policy front, as you just mentioned, of the Muslim voters, the Arab voters, how do you think that factor is going to play during this particular election, given the foreign policy front, the situation with Gaza since 7th of October 2023?
I think foreign policy, to be candid, is of very minor importance in American thinking. When people go to the ballot box, and you've just been at the ballot box, if you ask them, and maybe you will, what's your big issue? How much do I pay for groceries? What's my economy? Is the economy going to go up, go down? What do I pay for gas? That is what they care about. They're not going to sit there and worry about that, even though personally they might care about it. But at the end of the day, it's what Clinton said. It's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. Economy. That's the name of the game.
Okay, but this time around, we have seen massive demonstrations within the United States of America at various universities. So don't you think that sentiment is going to be at play during the elections when people go and cast their ballots?
I have to say I don't think so. I really don't.
Very quickly,
I don't believe it. I don't
so
believe
very quickly, what's your inkling who is going to grab this election this time around to become the new president of the United States of America?
All right, well, I think Trump is going to win because I think Harris made tremendous mistakes in not setting forth what her positions are and making that crystal clear. And Trump did it, for better or for worse. Trump is Trump. We know what we did. She just keeps saying, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, I'm going to do, and that's not enough. That's my view. Mr.
Professor Mark Mirowitz, State University of New York, Maritime College, thank you very much for being with us exclusively for Views on News at PTV World. Really appreciate you taking time out for this and for such an insightful discussion. And we'll have to look where Americans are going to lead, either of the two candidates, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Just 6 days are left from that November poll, and the early voting is already happening. Millions and millions of voters have already cast their ballots, and on 5th of November, by that evening, most probably we'll be seeing who's going to be the new president, the 47th president of the United States of America.
Well, you just listened to the conversation between Mark Mirowitz and Jawad Tehami. Of course, not just the American society stands polarized at the moment. All the analysts also stand polarized at the moment. We hear mixed remarks when it comes to who's going to be leading in these elections. But of course, 5th of November is the date when the Americans will be going to the polls, will be casting their ballots, and that's when we know who's going to be leading and who has better momentum. We'll continue and keep you updated with regards to the American elections. See you same time on Monday. Till then, stay tuned.